Hi everyone, welcome to We Are the Ancestors, a special mini-series produced for and within From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. My name is Nicolle Arthun, your host for these 4 episodes, and our guest today is Vanessa Roanhorse. Vanessa is a citizen of the Navajo Nation who is the CEO and owner of Roanhorse Consulting, where she leads key strategies focused on ecosystem building, access to capital, and community-led economic development activities. She is also a key co-founder of Native Women Lead, a national organization that invests in Indigenous women in business, of which she helped incubate and launch the Matriarch Fund, which is a financing strategy for Indigenous women to invest into Indigenous women. Vanessa sits on the boards of Delta Institute, Seven Fires, and Potlikker Capital. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. I feel like we've been talking about potentially having a podcast together because we have dinner and drinks often, and there's such a great conversations we have when we're in those spaces talking about life and work and family, and we've known each other for quite a few years, as you were really monumentally important to my beginning with Changing Women Initiative, and it's pretty incredible to see all that you've done with Roanhorse Consulting. I'm curious though, where you worked in Chicago before you came to Albuquerque. Can you talk about what you did before?
When I moved here in 2015, I didn't know what I was going to do. And while I may have been pivotal for Changing Women Initiative, you were the first person that trusted me to actually help build something. And I just want to say, I'll never forget that. Before moving here in 2015, which was like summer, I had been in Chicago for 15 years. Before that, I had been in many places, but Chicago is where I really kind of got my start. It's the first time I'd ever worked in a nonprofit or in the nonprofit sector. And at the time, which is funny because now I will be the new board chair for the Delta Institute, which means I'm my boss's boss now. I was hired on as an administrative assistant. And with 3 months, I moved from administrative assistant to actually managing the state's weatherization program, the city of Chicago and Illinois. And this was after the 2008 housing collapse. And they called it Obama money, but it was the ARA funds that came out. And it was this idea that green jobs were going to save us all, that there was a movement to clean energy, that we were going to create a workforce of people from our cultures and places who were going to be this next iteration of green. And we all know that didn't happen. So in Chicago, I got to play in spaces with the mayor, the governor. I got to work with national partners like IDEO and Office Depot, building out like behavioral change gamification programs to reduce greenhouse gas in large buildings, to working with the Black Caucus to really think about how could we create more like workers of color in weatherization and energy auditing jobs, to helping small communities deal with stormwater issues and creating what I'd like to think at the time was an open source version of green infrastructure templates. So I played in all kinds of spaces. My boss, who's now the CEO of the Delta Institute, it's the first time I'd ever just been trusted by someone to sort of say, we see something in you. What do you want to do? If you want to do it, let's do it. And there was never a question of, was it possible? So I need to say that because that seed was planted in Chicago at Delta Institute.
How would you describe what you do, though? I've read so many things about you, right? Like there's this beautiful bio about like what you do, but I'm like, what do you think you do?
I feel like I can tell you all the ways I don't do something. So, for example, one of my favorite things to say is like, because I don't have a college degree, I'm a total dropout. But what I know is I'm an excellent student. No, I'm an excellent learner. I'm a terrible student. I don't like to be told what to do because I'm really interested in tackling things from a place where it doesn't have to be linear or go through like the traditional processes and systems. I'm really curious about community power, community wisdom, and education, but I'm also really interested in folks learning as they go. I feel like it's a very indigenous way of learning. For years, I called it baptism by fire. And then I watched Res Dogs season 2. I don't think it's episode 3. Do I know that show very well? Yes, I do. There's like the spirit character who's in the porta potty, and Bear, the character, is asking questions, and the spirit guy goes, It's the Indigenous way of the Indigenous pedagogy, just get out there and learn, fucker. And I feel like that is literally who I am. So I no longer say baptism by fire. But what do? I think ecosystem building is probably the closest thing I've ever seen. But I weave connections. I spend my time thinking about what are we doing today, what did we do before, and where are we going? And I do that across all of my bodies of work. And for me, it's always about right relationships, thinking from a lens of when we do with community always at the end. When we do it to support the world that we live in. I don't believe in infinite scale. I don't believe in infinite resources. I think there's an opportunity for us to solve problems through an Indigenous worldview. And my poison of choice is economics and capital.
You're a Native woman in white space. And I remember a story you told me about going to a meeting, and you were like, I was very intentional about not going up to get coffee because then they would think that I could get them coffee too. Yeah. But you were like, man, but I really wanted coffee, but I didn't get it. And it just gave me a sense of like the mind games that like happen in these spaces right. that you have to think about before you enter them. And I really consider you as a leader in Indigenous, or an Indigenous leader for that matter. And
thank you.
How does it feel to be the only Native woman in these white spaces?
I mean, you know. First of all, you know what I know. So like in some ways we could just answer this question together. These spaces aren't built for us and they don't want us. And I say that just at this point, 9 years in, maybe longer, we have to get our way into the spaces we want and then we can't leave. But we have to get into these spaces and you have to know how to care for yourself. We talk a lot about healing. We talk a lot about self like caring, but also self accountability. Like it's our responsibility to prepare and to see a therapist and to talk to people about why these spaces are hard, because everything you're saying, everything you do, everything you present is going to be the way this group is going to think about Indigenous people and frankly Indigenous women. And so for me walking into these spaces, absolutely I refuse to get coffee. If someone's serving, I will take a cup of coffee. I always sit next to the person in charge of a meeting. I never offer to help. And the reason for all of that is the moment I look and act like a caring person, I'm immediately put into the category of helper.
Interesting.
So I think the opportunity is to just be like, what is it we want to present when we walk in? And so I bring my therapy, I bring my sisterhood and my matriarchy, but I also bring the fact that like I have learned how to talk to people with money, and that is a skill set that has been honed since I went to high school. And it is not for everybody, and I don't think everyone should have to do it, but I'm saying for me, this is like a gift, and it's something I'm very intentional about. And I bring in as many Indigenous women with me into these circles because I need folks to understand, like, how are people thinking and talking about us? And how are people thinking and talking about money? If money is the tool of today, which it is, unfortunately, then how can we just turn it back into a tool we wield, not the oppressors and the colonizers who've been wielding it over us? Did miss that cup of coffee, and that was a bummer, but you know what? Like, it was worth it, because after that, I was able to have some separate conversations with folks, and we were able to make some partnerships.
The other side of this coin of presenting confident, right, and unapologetic in white space, you're also in a lot of Indigenous female spaces, and that requires a different part of you. Because you can't present that way in that space. You know, as Native women, we're not supported in our community to be confident and to be outspoken and to be unapologetic. And so is there code switching that has to happen to be in these other spaces, or how do you make that adjustment?
I think a lot back to when we were kids, right? And there was a ceremony happening. When your grandmother and your aunties rounded you up, it was like, don't ask questions. Just serve, bring out the coffee, make sure the food's there, make sure it's still hot, is the fire going? Like, you were directed by your aunties and your grandmother. Like, you were like, don't question them, just do it. And I feel like on one hand, that teaching has been really powerful, and on the other hand, it's something I've also had to unlearn, relearn what the purpose of that was. Because coming into Indigenous women's spaces, I'm going to be honest, I was naive, because for me, I've always been incredibly independent. My mom has always supported my sister and I to be extremely independent. And I forgot what it was like to have to think about managing, like, who's the eldest, who has the most experience in X, Y, and Z, how do we think about inviting everybody in thoughtfully. I just love to jump in and stuff and be like, I've got an idea, let's do this thing, blah, 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 blah. And I had to learn how to slow down and like sit and like wait for process and protocol to happen again. But the biggest unlearning has been trying to navigate the landmines that come from historical trauma, individual trauma, trauma of money, and not know where everyone's at, not know where everyone's on their healing journey, not knowing where everyone's comfort level is in being in decision-making circles, and also acknowledging that for so many of us, we've not been in positions of power over ourselves, our families, our lives. And so coming in with this idea that we're all on the same page, that was really clear pretty quickly how not true that was, but also how other people's stuff can prohibit, inhibit, and often contribute to things falling apart. The last thing I want to say too is like this idea that we have to heal while also transforming money and systems is also going to be at the cause of our bodies being sacrificed for the next, you know what I mean? Like, because for us to truly change the systems and reimagine what's necessary, we need a generation of healing. So you shouldn't be hustling as hard as you are. I shouldn't be hustling as hard as I am. But that's not the opportunity. So we're just going to keep hurting each other because we don't have enough time to heal.
I remember the first time I met you were like, had this huge schematic of drawings you were doing about how you were going to get money and funding to CWI, and I was just blown away by your forethought in thinking about how to leverage this funding and partnerships to get the funding we needed to build the organization that I founded. I think one of the heartbreaks of being an innovative person is that not everybody's going to be where you're at, and not everybody's going to be ready for your ideas. And this is the part that I think is sometimes hard for those of us who are leading work, is we're held to the utmost accountability by everyone else, but we don't get to look back and say, well, how are you accountable to your actions and participation in this system that's not working for us?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about healing, I think often that piece of we're still in victim mindset, that it's everyone else's fault but our own, contributes to the problem. And I know you've had to do a lot of work around that. And part of that work, it sounds like, is your understanding of how you feel about being in a powerful position, and B, what is your relationship to power? Because there's a lot of us who are not comfortable with that, right? We don't know what to do with it. It feels uncomfortable. It makes us other. We no longer fit with the group. And then we're treated accordingly. And so where have you had to make adjustments with being in this position of power that people, A, perceive you, and B, that you are really a powerhouse, you have a lot to offer, and that's something to be really proud of. But like, what work have you had to do to get comfortable with that?
I didn't know this about myself really until I started Roanhorse Consulting. And even in the early days of Roanhorse Consulting, I was just, I knew this piece and this piece needed to fit together so that I could get to the next piece. But I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing or how I was doing it. I could see the moving parts. And it took time for me to realize that my ability to think in this way also meant that my ability to have strategy and a vision forethought had a lot of value. It's taken me time to understand my power and, one, to accept it. There's something about it that feels really icky. And I think that's because of like our experience of power And I'm trying to remind myself that, again, power is something that could be reimagined. What has happened in the past is I shared with everybody. I was unapologetically open to, if anyone needed something, I was there for you. I was an open book. I would be like, no questions asked, introduce you, connect you, invite you, give you my templates, give you an hour of pay time with my accountant. If you needed something, I was here. And if you were building something, I was there. However, what I found is that all of that, what I thought were right relationships, people made their own movie in their mind about what I was doing and the power I had. And then it was quickly taken advantage of. I realized if I'm going to sustain who I am and I'm going to sustain what I'm building and why I'm building it, which is to center Indigenous worldview across everything we do, this idea of power sharing has to change and has to be very particular, very specific. In a meeting, someone said, we have to stop treating Vanessa like an ATM machine. And that was a very painful thing to hear, because on one hand, people know I have access to things which are considered powerful. But on the other hand, people know I'm such an open, giving person, which is not very powerful. It's actually just so it's how do I reconcile the two? I think going forward, when I think about who I am and the power I have, my power has to be directed so that, one, I'm thoughtfully bringing everyone who needs to be brought in along with me along, and I'm sharing with those who give me back some reciprocity. Those are requirements I didn't have before. And so as someone who does get to have a lot of decision making and has seats at various tables, I do that because I believe that it's really, to get to where I think we need to go, I have to be more responsible and accountable with this power, but I also need to be discerning and judicious about what happens with it.
I feel
that's where my heart's at.
I feel like a lot of leaders that I've spoken to and work with are not the most comfortable with power. And I think the other piece of this is you have special, unique gifts to do what you do. How can you apologize for being and having those gifts? And some of those things you worked really hard for.
For sure.
And some of those things come naturally to you, and some of those things that not everybody can do and will be able to do. And it's not your fault that's how it worked out for you. But that is something I think when you talk about being comfortable with power is in some ways being comfortable with being your full self unapologetically of yes, I have all of these wonderful gifts that I can do these things and I can't apologize for them, nor can I shrink myself to fit in with everybody else because it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think where you and I have become really good friends is our trajectory of our own leadership has been very similar in the sense of I started this with lots of hope and wanting to help many people, have got taken advantage of. I've had to really think about, yes, I want to bring everyone along with me, but now I'm in a place of wait a minute, not everyone's ready to do what I do at this level of development in myself, meaning being comfortable being seen, being comfortable being disliked, being comfortable speaking your truth, being self-aware that you are super accountable, yes, to everyone else, but you're most firstly accountable to yourself. And I think it's really important to be surrounded with the right people who bring out those qualities in you and support you, but also are your cheerleading team, right? You're gonna mess up, but they're also hey, it's okay, this happens, but you're a wonderful person regardless.
Finding yourself in a leadership position on the outset looks amazing. How cool is it to be CEO of something?
Right.
And then you do it and you're I have no idea what I'm doing. This is very lonely. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is I know what my limitations are. I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. I'm very clear on what I'm not good at. But I enjoy people, and I love learning from folks. So our hangs have always been about how do we approach this complex challenge? Or I'm going through, sometimes it's just like leaning on each other, being like, this is so hard, tears, you know. Other times it's, if I don't hang out, I'm going to go punch someone in the face, like whatever it is. But it was like you had a circle of people that you can turn into and say, we're going to get through this. The other thing I think is really unique is, like, as Indigenous people and as Indigenous women in leadership, we actually want to do leadership differently. We don't want to mimic, you know, traditional business culture, nonprofit culture of leadership. We want to imagine beyond it. We also, as leaders, are constantly thinking about every moving aspect of everybody in our work and who we're connected to and how we build relationships. Like, I fundamentally think the business case and the model for Indigenous women in leadership is strong. But in order for it to be strong, we need to have mentors and coaches and therapists and friends, because this is, to do this work is not a solo sport, as they like to say. This is a full-on team lift. When we all circle around Nicolle Arthun, it's because we're here to make sure you get to achieve the goal that you're after. And then the team switches and comes around and circles around me. But the idea is that, like, we don't do this alone. And I think as Indigenous women in leadership, we fundamentally know that. Versus everybody else is like, oh, it's a solo sport, it's a grind, it's blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm hustling, I'm crushing it. I don't want to crush it. I don't want to grind it. I don't want to hustle it. I want to, like, lovingly, with softness and ease, work with my community to make sure I'm achieving the goals. Because if I'm doing it correctly, then I'm not creating just my leadership, I'm creating multiple tributaries of leadership.
I think another piece of our friendship that I enjoy is you're someone I can talk to who understands what it's like to get our ass kicked. And like we're in it 100%. And like we can like be very candid about what that feels like, right? It's not easy, right?
No.
Nobody understands the level of stress that we carry every day, and the sacrifices that we've made, and the heavy lift that we've done to create the organizations and the businesses and all of the other work that comes from our passion, our creativity. Can you speak a little bit to like the sacrifices you made for this work?
When I started our CLC, my son was 14 months old. And then Roanhorse Consulting. So I used to joke that I was raising two babies. I had a baby business and I had a baby at home. My greatest sacrifice has been the amount of energy I put into building Roanhorse Consulting, Native Women Lead, Zebras Unite, all of these other things, was that the result of not being home enough with my son and having to, and being so single-minded that I wasn't nurturing my relationship with my partner, that I just got so focused on this vision because I was so angry and so pissed off at the systems that have hurt us for so long that I told myself this was a calling and that this is what I had to do. So I think for all of us as women, and especially if you have young children or you have children at home, you know, your body is the first that goes. So like my biggest sacrifice is my body. Like I have gained weight, I've lost weight, I don't sleep very well, my hair went super gray the first 5 years. But then the other loss is the time you're able to really invest in your family, the time you're really able to invest in your children, because this work pulls you. It needs so much. It's almost worse than a baby. You know what I mean? Because there's like so many mouths to feed and there's so much need. There's so much need. And it's so easy to forget that this is not solvable in my lifetime. I'm only helping here and there, but what is solvable or what is doable is my family. And so it took me a long time to know that.
Let's talk about dealing with haters, because as we've both had to deal with them.
Yeah.
And it comes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're a woman in this position and on the positions that we're in and the work that we've done, where people can have a lot of untrue negative things to say about you. How have you had to deal with your haters? We have to talk about it because it's out there, it happens.
Yeah. There's a lot of like non-native people in the financial world. in foundation world and investors who are just look at me and they're like, dilettante, like, ugh, I could care less. Those things don't bother me. Now where the haters who hate that actually hurt, it's your own people, it's your own community, it's your own circles. And I think like that I wasn't prepared for. I was not prepared to have people come for me or to say things about me, and for me to find out later, I just wasn't prepared. Like, you know what? We all talk about each other. It's a small community. We're not joking. We say Indian country is tiny. We're not kidding. We're the original small Kevin Bacon. We're like, we're the original Kevin Bacons before Kevin Bacon. So whoever that was. And I think like when it first started happening, my initial gut instinct was to be like, it's just a misunderstanding. Let me help clarify what happened. Oh no, that's not how I meant it. Or I'm not sure what you thought, but let me tell you why I'm doing this. Let me show my values. Let me share my heart. And we can get on the same page. Like, I know this is solvable. We can have tough conversations, right? I'm all about tough conversations. Right. Talk about like learning very quickly. That wasn't, whatever the issue was, it had nothing to do with actually repair or having tough conversations. And that's when I started to realize that this culture of hate, or this culture of people who disliked me and what I was doing, that's a them problem, not a me problem. So that's been like huge. But the other is, how do I deal with it? And the truth of it is my tactic and strategy from the very beginning, because this started the moment I started Roanhorse Consulting, has just been like, let the work show you. Let the work that I do show you.
What personal habits and professional habits do you have to sustain you in your capacity? Because everybody's capacity is different every day, right? As an Indigenous woman, our capacities change with our families, with our community commitments, with ceremonial activities. So how do you, what do you do to have full capacity at the most?
I found out I have ADHD, which was, on one hand, I was just like, man, that makes so much sense. I was like, oh, wow, okay. The way I work and move has been consistently described as contained chaos, a tornado, and I burn people out around me. I move so quickly, not physically, I'm not very agile, but my work moves quickly, my brain moves quickly, I can see pieces coming together fast, and I work the way I like to work. And for a long time I felt really bad about that. I thought there was something wrong with me. So the ADHD diagnosis has really helped me think about how some parts of that are absolutely superpowers, and then how other parts I need to work on to be better, more consistent, present with my family and my friends. So the big things I do now is I have a ritual and a routine that I stick to every morning. I get up early, I clean my kitchen, I listen to the news, and then I do usually a 10-minute meditation, stretching, glass of water, then cup of coffee, and then I wake my son up. And something about having rituals, and I have another ritual when I get home, but these rituals support me to be prepared for anything, but they also give me clarity and space to say, this is my time, and this is how I'm gonna function for the rest of the day. The other is, I think the really big one is I stopped traveling so much. I used to be on the circuit. If there's a conference circuit and you have a sector, I was on it. And I think in 2020, I did something like 50 panels. Wow. And keynotes and presentations. 2021, I think it was 40 something. 2022 is when I was kind of like, what am I doing? My partner called me in, was just like, this is not a life. So since then, I've gone from a lot to probably about 6 or 7 a year. And by being judicious that way, it's changed my entire relationship with my partner, my son, my sister, my team members. The other has been, I shut it down at 6. I may be back on at 10 o'clock till 1 a.m., but I shut it down at 6 to have dinner, to hang out, play a game if possible. And then when everyone's done, yeah, I'm going to get back on because I can.
Hello, listeners. Zachariah here. I just wanted to share one of my favorite sites for buying Indigenous art and learning about Indigenous artists. An Indigenous woman-owned and operated business, ProjectAntelope.com is an innovative online marketplace that features fine arts, fashion, books, music, and home goods. If you like to support Indigenous art and artists, ProjectAntelope.com is a great place to start. Tell them I sent you.
So you've shifted to being a single owner of a business to a larger staff of people. And that scaling up also doesn't come easy because it's not just the money piece, but managing people and building policies internally to manage people. Because we assume everybody comes to work ready to work with the same values as our own, with the same ability to communicate our needs, but that's not the case. And so you have a family here that you're also having to manage on top of the family you have at home. Like, how do you do that?
Right now, I would say our team, it's the most brilliant group of people I've ever worked with in my freaking life. And I don't know if I can ever say that again. There's a part of me that wants to be like, God, we're so lucky, but we're not. This wasn't luck. This was hardcore, intentional culture, systems, operations, business building. And that wasn't me. It was my twin sister, Olivia, joined the company in 2019. And it was through her will and interest that she got us out of the contained chaos, Roanhorse Consulting, Vanessa tornado, and was like, you do you, but while you're doing you, I'm going to create a system around us so we can actually bring in all of these people and we can create a company that's grounded in culture and values first. So the way I've done it is by acknowledging that I couldn't do it alone, that my gifts are very specific here, and creating culture, systems, and operations isn't actually one of my gifts. And by bringing in people who wanted that and wanted to build it, and I trusted them implicitly, not just because she's my sister, but if you ever get to meet her, well, you know her, but for the audience, whoever, we are literally the opposites of each other, and so we complement in the perfect way.
You very much are.
Yeah. It was just knowing that, like, growth for me meant I can't do this alone, and I needed to let go and trust other people to do and bring their gifts to the table. And the moment I did that, here we are.
I think it's important to interject here, too, that there can be a level of shame and guilt as an emerging leader that you have to know everything and do everything well, right? There's also an expectation, right? And either you're surrounded by people who are criticizing you and saying you're not working hard enough, you're not working good enough, or I thought you could do these things.
Yeah.
Or you're surrounded with a supportive group of people who are like, all right, you're good at these things. We're going to help you build these other things that you're not so great at.
Yeah.
Because we support you. And I think it's important to say that because so much of what we do in the work as leaders in this, especially in our communities, is there is a lot of guilt and shame about what you can't do. And it's something that I think is built in this framework of, again, victimness, and that it's okay to say I don't know something or I'm not good at that, but to build a team around you of people who are good at those things. My last question for you is, if you could tell yourself something when you the Vanessa now versus the Vanessa that started, what's some advice you would give her?
I think my advice for, like, when I started this would honestly be like, take a beat, pause, ask yourself, like, do you need to say yes to everything? Because when I started, I said I didn't know how to say no. And just tell the younger me, like, you're going to get there. You don't have to say yes to everything. You don't have to bend over backwards. just take a beat, like don't just keep running blindly into everything. Like slow down, take a beat. Also, it wasn't operating under like financial trauma and stress because I needed a job and no one was going to hire me. That's the other thing I forgot to say is nobody would hire me when I moved here. No one cared what I did in Chicago. I didn't have a degree. And so like I was so scared that we were going to run out of money, that I wasn't going to be able to feed our baby. And that all just comes from growing up the way we grew up on the res, super poor, and just seeing how tough it could be. I know my version of work was just ridiculous out of fear. It was driven by anger and fear. And I would just go back and be like, don't be so afraid. You're going to figure it out. Slow down. Because I'm pretty sure Roanhorse Consulting has taken a minimum of 5 years off of my life. And I'd like those years back. So things are getting better.
Things are better.
Things are getting better.
Is there anything I didn't ask or that you thought came through as we were talking? Because I feel like we just manifest so many ideas. I think at one point we were like talking about a book, which I think will probably still happen.
Yeah.
There's like, I feel like there's this just, we meet up and we talk about our ideas and then it's like, oh, we're going to do this next.
I think what I want to say about you in particular is like, it's a rarity to meet people in your life who don't just have ideas, but actually, to the word you just said, manifest. This experience is a manifestation of something you have shared with me many times. I know a book is going to be happening. The thing I wanted to say in reflection back to you is just like, if there's anyone I know who's going to make something happen, it's Nicolle Arthun. And thank you for inviting me. But honestly, I'm just like, wherever you go, I'll follow.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you because I'm like, there's just this part of you that I don't feel like sometimes people get access to. So
No, most people don't.
So I'm like, this is an opportunity to get a little access to you because I think you're just an amazing person and you have so many wonderful gifts to offer the world and you care about people and you're hella funny and you're so fun to hang out with. And I'm just like, do people even know who this person is? I'm like, come on, like she's incredible. And I feel honored to be part of your circle of tight friends and friendship because like I couldn't have gotten through all the stuff that I got through without our conversations. Because it's like, it really matters to have somebody who understands.
Yeah.
Sit there and talk and listen and just reflect with you and remind you that like whatever bad shit you're dealing with, like, you know, A, you'll get through it, and B, you have support, and C, you're an amazing person, and you know, you can't always take everything personally.
Right. If there was one thing then, now that you just brought that up, I think like knowing that we have each other, but that also like encouraging everyone to find your people. You know, I couldn't have gotten through last year if it weren't for like my close circle of friends, you included. And I can honestly say now that like as that is slowly like ebbing away, the future is so big and it's so exciting, and I can't wait to continue just like link arms together while you're in DC and I'm here, and see what we can do. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of From Here with a View, a We Are the Seeds Philadelphia podcast. Please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. You'll be helping us grow our listener community and elevate the impact of our podcast. You can learn more about this podcast at wearetheseeds.org. From Here with a View is executive produced by Michelle St. John with Zachariah Julian and Tyler Nagoyo producing. Sound mixing and original theme music by Zachariah Julian. To listen to more from Zachariah, follow him on Spotify and Apple Music. From Here with a View logo art was inspired by an original oil pastel drawing by artist Jason Weesaw. Graphic design by Fernanda Leon. This podcast was funded in part by Independence Public Media Foundation. We'll see you next time on From Here with a View.